Hey everyone, it's Short Fiction Friday. This week I read 3 short stories: Loop by Douglas E. Winter, The Dream of the Wolf by Scott Bradfield, and The Cell by David Case. Let's start with Loop by Douglas E. Winter. This story was first published in Dark Love, and it's about this man Delacourt who is obsessed with a porn star, and he develops a parasocial bond with her. He tries to find every movie she's ever been in. He feels that he's in love with her, even though they've never actually met. This story goes to some pretty gross places. I'm not sure if you would call it extreme horror, but given the subject matter, it's very, very detailed. And maybe a little bit too detailed. A lot of the story is just Delacourt recounting movie after movie that he's watched, kind of detailing this girl's whole career. The theme of becoming obsessed with someone that you've only ever seen through a screen, these days we would call it parasocial. Obviously, that's still very relevant. So yeah, this was all right. The next short story I read was The Dream of the Wolf by Scott Bradfield. It was first published in 1984 in Interzone magazine number 10. This story isn't really horror at all. Maybe you could call it like the lightest, tamest horror story. Basically, our main character, Larry, he's obsessed with wolves. He's constantly dreaming about wolves, and it starts to affect the people around him as well. His relationships worsen. He's just so obsessed with wolves. People try to tell him to knock it off politely. His manager at work is kind of saying, hey, quit talking about wolves. You've got a deadline soon. It's pretty much just a family drama, a work drama, but with the weird element of this character really loves wolves. Yeah, this one's not really to my tastes. I just wasn't interested in a character drama, but it wasn't really bad as such either. Okay, the last story I read this week was The Cell by David Case. This first appeared in The Cell and Other Tales of Horror from 1969. This story is told from first-person perspective, and it's a series of diary entries. Basically, there's this guy that thinks he's becoming a werewolf. He and his wife have built a cell in their basement so that whenever he's transforming, he can go down to this cell and lock himself inside, and he won't harm himself or anyone else. He started this diary because he thinks the transformations are getting worse and worse. He starts to think that the wolf mentality is kind of taking him over for longer stretches. And as you read through the diary, you start to understand that this guy is kind of an unreliable narrator, and maybe he's not being fully honest about his transformations, or maybe that it's even all in his head to start with. He seems at first relatively normal, but then you start to understand he's got a weird prudish mentality. He's always very patronizing to his wife, and he's got a very rambling writing style. And it's this rambling writing style that would maybe put off readers a little bit, I think. I think this is overall a good story, but did it need to be 50 pages? As an insight into the character and how disturbed he is, maybe it did need to be this rambling length, but at the same time it does get a bit repetitive. Still, this is probably the best short story that I read this week. All right, and to rate these 3 short stories, I'm comparing them against my big list, the top 15. So I'll put the list up on the screen here. As you can probably tell, none of these stories are going to make the list. They were all okay this week, nothing bad, but also nothing that really stood out. So the list will remain the same. All right, let's pick some new short stories for next week. The way this works is very simple. I've got book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. The 6-sided die will select the book. The 12-sided die will select the story within the book. Okay, first roll of the dice. One and 3. I skip over stories that I've already read. Those are shown with the pencil marks. 1, 2, 3. I'll be reading Down the Rabbit Hole by Norman Spinrad. And that's 6 pages. I'm going to keep rolling the dice until I get to 50 pages or more. Second roll. 5 and 11. That's Dark Love. I don't think there's 11 stories left in this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. 7, 8, 9. Well, I can't read the 11th story. There's not 11 stories left. So I'm just going to read the last story. It's Locked Away by Carl Edward Wagner. And that's 16 pages. So we're up to 22 pages total. Okay, third roll of the dice. Two and 2. That's the body horror book. 1, 2. I'm reading Herbert West, Reanimator by H.P. Lovecraft, and that's 34 pages, which takes us over the 50-page minimum. All right, so I'll be reading these 3 short stories for next week. I'll put them up on the screen here. Go read these short stories if you have access to them. I'm especially looking forward to H.P. Lovecraft. Actually, I'm looking forward to all of these. I've never read any Norman Spinrad. All right, thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye.